Hello, Mark, and welcome.
Great to see you, Tim. How are you?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Doing very, very well.
Good. Glad to hear it. We have a few questions for you today, kind of an update on progress with Canada Nickel Company, as well as with the nickel market in general. So first, can you give us an update on the nickel market? What has been driving the recent rally in the nickel price?
Unlike most of the news flow in December and January, which was your classic capitulation market bottom kind of news, the nickel market is much stronger than unfortunately the very bad analysis that's done by groups like WoodMac and CRU have indicated. We've gone through the first 3 years of this decade, averaging nickel demand at 10% plus a year. Our view is we should see double-digit demand growth this year. And, as BHP and others were talking about how bad the nickel market was, one of the leading nickel analysts, Jim Lennon, traveled to China, realized that the reported numbers that the various Chinese agencies were reporting were about 150,000 tons of nickel per year short, which is about 5% of global demand. And so, most analysts now have basically, a number of them have reduced their surpluses. And so, we're basically close in his last report, which actually came out last week, suggested we're close to a balanced market. So, so I was not surprised at all. And I had said back in January that post-Chinese New Year, we were going to see a restocking rally from the battery side of nickel demand, and that is indeed what's happened. Nickel and cobalt and graphite to some extent got caught up in the big downdraft in lithium prices last year, which caused the entire battery supply chain to destock, any and all battery materials, which unfortunately included some nickel. So just as an example of what that gap looked like, if you measured nickel going into cars, it was up about 30% plus. If you look at nickel going in the front of the supply chain, it was only up 4%. So we're quite confident with continued strong demand growth on the stainless steel side that we'll see double-digit demand growth this year. Indonesia looks like it's keeping its hand on the faucet and not letting too much ore come out of Indonesia. And again, they're going to struggle with grade going forward. So the market's got to a good place. We're sitting with just a few days of inventory on the LME right now. Again, despite rumors of hundreds of thousands of tons of excess supply, that stuff hasn't materialized because those surpluses were not real. And so, nickel market's in great shape. And I think it's going to be an exciting 2024 as we move forward. I think we're pretty much done here. I think we kind of cap out at this level, but by the end of the year, we should, start to move higher again.
Now, continue on the nickel market, but with a different angle. Some industry leaders, believe the LME should have separate pricing for green nickel, as opposed to the laterites, for example. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, no, it's definitely, I think, across various metals, I think nickel is the most pronounced in terms of, the scale of the carbon footprint of the material from Indonesia and all the other assorted environmental damage that comes with it. Unfortunately, what you need to do is as much as I might like someone to say green premium today, the reality is, to allow that to be effectively implemented, you need the market to want to need it. So both suppliers and consumers ready to transact on that basis. And so I think you'll see some, kind of weekly, monthly quoted prices as a start, and some of those are already starting. And then it eventually evolve into, regularly exchange traded product if the market gets there. I think the key thing for us, as long as there's a quoted, product premium, then we're in great shape. And then I think the key thing for people to realize is that there's already a premium in North America for a range of products. Part of the reason we've got our net zero metals downstream business set up is, to be able to, fully take advantage of those local product premiums. And again, today exist for carbon steel, stainless steel, aluminum, zinc, and nickel products. And so, we think it's there already. It's a mix of different things, including just being local. But again, with the tariffs that Joe Biden put on last week, that number is only going to get bigger as we move forward, which is exciting for companies like us that will have projects behind this tariff wall.
Now, focusing in on Canada Nickel Company, what are the next steps in advancing your flagship Crawford project?
So for Crawford, there's basically 3 work streams this year. So first off is permitting. We should complete the second stage of that this summer with the filing of the environmental impact statement. That puts the government on a 365-day maximum clock. And so we expect to be able to receive our permits, to begin construction at Crawford by the middle of next year. The next work stream associated with that is to make sure you've got the money in place to do that. So we're working with Scotia and Deutsche Bank, who are our equity project joint venture advisors, and then as well Cutfield Freeman, who's providing advisory on the debt side. And the path forward here is to get that full financing package in place by year end, so that when the permits come up, we can start construction. And the last key task that's related to that with Crawford is really around completing the detail engineering you need to be able to effectively put that shovel in the ground. When you complete a feasibility study, you're only at about 10% engineering. We announced about 6 weeks ago that we started our front end engineering design, which will take that amount of engineering up to about 30%. And then we'll continue to advance that towards that, mid-summer 2025 start of construction, which remains our target.
And then stretching beyond Crawford, looking at your portfolio of projects in the Timmins camp, you've had success drilling several targets in your project pipeline. Mm-hmm. Which targets are emerging as the strongest and most likely to advance behind Crawford?
Yeah, no, I think that's the piece that's exciting. It was great discovering and advancing Crawford, which is second largest nickel reserve in the world and would be the third largest nickel sulfide operation if we were fully ramped up today. But what's even more exciting is the fact that we really do believe we're unlocking an entire nickel sulfide district, which has the potential, based on the geophysical footprint we have, to be the world's largest nickel sulfide district. Agnico Eagle provided the backstop for a charity flow-through raise of $35 million. We have to spend that all this year. And so, we've got 6 drill rigs turning right now. And in terms of the portfolio, we've got 11 targets that are larger than Crawford in terms of the target footprint that we have. We have a portfolio of over 20 of them. And so, by this time next year, we expect to have 7 additional resources and have made another half dozen new discoveries. In terms of, ones that we see so far that, people are pretty excited about, Reed, obviously, given the scale, it's a multiple the size of Crawford. Geometry wise, it's very wide as well as being very long, which should contribute, once we get to the PEA stage, of having a relatively low strip ratio. We like our Midlothian project. All 4 holes there, had closer to 0.28, 0.29 grades on average, which is about 30% higher than the average grade of Crawford, which is both dunite and peridotite. We've got our whole series of man properties just east of Crawford. Again, each one of those targets is larger than Crawford. We successfully took our Crawford flow sheet, ran some man material through it, and it worked out pretty well. And so, that's the piece I think for people to realize here is, we've got the engineering and all the development work we've done with Crawford. We should be able to roll that out, to the various properties. There'll be some subtle differences between the different deposits, but we can leverage all the work we did with Crawford, where we went from resource to fully, to feasibility study in 4 years. We should be able to do that in even faster with some of these other properties. So very, very exciting year coming up here with the news flow from all that regional drilling.
Now, you also recently announced a plan to develop downstream nickel processing and steel manufacturing plants through net zero. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an overview of plans for those plants?
Yeah, so the company is being led by a former Inco colleague of mine who, for the last dozen years with Inco, oversaw their global nickel refinery network. When you look at the whole mined EV strategy that both the Ontario government and the federal government are pushing, here in Ontario and central Canada, the missing link is that first stage processing that can take a product out of the mine and then convert it into something usable for either the battery industry or the historic uses in the stainless steel and alloy market. So we're going to be using existing technology, nothing new or novel here. Just building these plants in the Timmins region, and then being able to take any of the carbon that comes out of those plants and sequester them in our tailings. The second piece is we produce a magnetite chrome nickel product And when you look at the range of various steels that are produced, there's a large number of various alloy steels and stainless steels that are made up of nickel, chrome, and iron. So rather than try and pull them apart to just have them put back together again, we'll be using, proven technology. We've got SMS on the steel side and Metso on the nickel processing side to help design and engineer those plants. And we expect to have feasibility studies done on both plants, and looking forward, to getting a site in place in the Timmins region to be able to transform and capture that additional value right here in Ontario.
Could you tell us a bit more? You had mentioned the former Inco colleague of yours, but can you tell us a bit more about the team you've assembled for that work?
Yeah, so right now the key staff are that we have worked together in different roles in both from Korea and from Japan. The plants that we're looking to basically emulate are plants that Inco had built and operated in those regions for many, many decades. And so it's great to have people with experience, directly building and running those kinds of plants working for us now. We announced about 2 months ago that we've engaged SMS, who's one of a handful of companies that designs and builds steel plants, and then Metso, who are the leading company in terms of certain pyrometallurgical processes that we're going to be using for the plant. So it's great to work with, an A-list team of engineers, and we've got an A-list staff who are advancing this project. So again, I think once we get to year end here in the feasibility study, people will be surprised at the kind of numbers, we'll be, and the profitability we'll be able to generate from those downstream businesses. And we're getting a lot of interest specifically just in those downstream businesses as well as Crawford.
And would you plan to spin out Net Zero as a separate company, or would this be a single vertically integrated company?
We'll hold on to a good chunk of it at this point in time, but we'll see how the market evolves, and if it makes sense for us to spin out a portion of it, we would look to spin out a portion of it, going forward. So there's a once in a generation opportunity right now with the volume of government funding, both for mining projects, but even more so for these processing plants. There's a whole series of additional programs that we can tap into that aren't available to mining projects. And so, we'll be able to use, relatively little shareholders' capital. We'll hopefully have some joint venture partners into some of these projects and using their capital along with the government to be able to build these assets, which we hope, will be 40, 50, 100-year assets that'll add value for many, many decades, in the Northeast Ontario region.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mark. Great to get an update on nickel and Canada Nickel Company.
No, and thanks, Tim. You and Red Cloud have been a great support all the way from the very beginning. So very much appreciated.